Hello everyone and welcome to a very nice Blitz game that was played yesterday in chess.com's title Tuesday. It is Hikaru Nakamura versus MagnusCarlsen. And before you guys start writing that those are not their ratings, they are actually their chess.com ratings. So yes, Hikaru is rated 3200 and the Magnus also 3200, as the ratings there are a bit higher than you would expect in regular chess. But aside from that, the opening used here is quite spectacular. So Hikaru has the white pieces and he opens with pawn to a3, like in the grand match Adolf Anderssen played against Paul Morphy in 1858. This game also deserves such a grand opening, and Magnus doesn't reply with just anything. He plays pawn to g5, and I think Hikaru knew that Magnus was playing all of his games in this tournament using weird moves, so that's why I think Hikaru challenged him to an even weirder game. So a3, pawn to g5, like I said, the Anderssen opening, and now pawn to e4. And it is already now, as of move 2, that we have a completely new game. So no one ever thought of playing this. And Magnus plays pawn to c5. And if you think about it, it's pretty much like Hikaru played e4, Magnus played c5, so we have the Sicilian defense. Then Hikaru played this very, very offbeat a3, and Magnus played the extremely aggressive g5. So that's basically the game that we are having here. So d4, c captures, queen captures now, attacking Magnus's rook here, and knight to f6 now. Trying to get Hikaru to push the pawn all the way to e5, but this isn't all that great, because then knight to c6 attacks the queen and the pawn, and after the queen moves, then you just further harass the queen, knight e4, then the queen will be able to come to a5 with check, putting pressure on the e5 pawn, so it's nothing good for white. So instead, after knight f6, just bishop captures on g5, Hikaru says, okay, thank you for the pawn. It's a weird Sicilian where I played this slow a3 move, but I'm up a pawn, so I'm very happy with this. So knight to c6, Magnus attacks the queen, queen to d3, and now queen to b6. For this price of one pawn, Magnus is up in development and currently attacking the b2 pawn. And now you could consider something like captures, captures, and then maybe queen b5 to offer a queen trade, but Hikaru just goes back, bishop to c1, and defends the b2 pawn. Knight to g4 by Magnus, going after queen captures on f2 here. Maybe Hikaru misses it, but knight to h3. Hikaru nicely defends. d6, and now knight to c3. We have knight g to e5, putting pressure on the queen here. And now, as Magnus got some development in, Hikaru says, all right, now it's time to trade. Queen to b5 offers a queen trade. And Magnus, well, he could go back. It's not really a position you want to play, because the only reason you give up a pawn is to be ahead in development by putting pieces on their starting squares. That's not really happening. So queen captures on b5, and now Hikaru could go for knight captures on b5, and it looks like you should, because you're attacking the c7 square for threatening this nice fork. The problem is this would only help Magnus with bishop captures on h3. And now it's a very, very funny position where you could play a lot of moves, but the absolute best is pawn to f4. This is how Hikaru would keep his advantage of the extra pawn. Knight to f3, and now after g captures on f3, bishop captures on f1, rook captures, and now Magnus would play king to d7, and the game continues with Hikaru being up a pawn, but having a doubled f pawn. So he's still ahead. It's nothing spectacular, but he is definitely ahead. And sorry for the board being cropped a little bit in the previous video, or I think it maybe even in the previous 3 videos. I realized that the first time I did it, but when I'm recording, I don't see it, so I forget about it. But I've fixed it now. So king d7, and yeah, like I said, after queen captures on b5, Hikaru goes for bishop captures, not knight captures. So bishop captures on h3, Magnus ruins Hikaru's pawn structure here, g captures, and now just pawn to a6, bishop back to e2, controlling the knight on e5 nicely from e2, and now knight to d4. Magnus attacks the bishop and also threatens knight captures on c2 check. So king d1. You will not be castling, so it doesn't really matter. Knight captures on e2, knight captures on e2, and now rook to c8, putting pressure on the c file, and Hikaru plays b3. He wants to play c4. So he no longer has to worry about the c-pawn. So rook to g8 by Magnus, claiming the open g-file for his rook, and bishop to e3 now. We have pawn to b5 by Magnus. Here knight to f3 would be a very nice idea for Magnus, because as long as Hikaru doesn't push this pawn to f4, you are very, very comfortable here, and it's going to be very hard to dislodge this knight from f3. But now after b5, he gives Hikaru a target. Hikaru plays a4, we have b4 by Magnus. So now this is a backward pawn, it's not going to be easy to defend it, but now Hikaru plays rook to a2. And although a weird square for the rook, you will see that it has many purposes there. But not right away. First, of course, we have a5 here, we have e6, and now rook to a2. We have bishop to e7, and knight to g3 now. We have king to d7 by Magnus. The bishop is coming to d8, so he wants to put pressure on the a5 pawn. King to e2, and now bishop to d8. We have rook to d1, and now we have rook to b8. Here, I think Magnus was worried about rook to d4, maybe going after the b4 pawn or something, but it's a very unpleasant. Once you move the rook, now bishop to c5 becomes an option, putting pressure on b4 and also on d6. But first Hikaru finally dislodges the knight, pawn to f4. We have knight to c6, and now bishop to c5 attacks the d6 pawn. So Magnus defends it, bishop to c7, and now just bishop captures on d6. This is not a sacrifice, it's merely a trade, as Hikaru will attack the bishop with e5. So bishop captures, pawn to e5, king c7, Magnus unpins, and now e captures on d6. And here we have a remarkable moment in chess where everything you know about chess is telling you to play king to d7, when in fact you should play king to d8. Magnus played king to d7, and now he's in a bit of a trouble, because now Hikaru plays knight to e4. This threatens knight to f6 check, this very unpleasant fork, and it's hard for Magnus to make a move. Of course, no chess player will now play king to d8 and admit that king to d7 was a mistake, especially not if you are a world champion, even though this should be played. So instead, Magnus goes for the counter attack, rook to g2 with check, but now Hikaru is completely winning, but you have to figure out how. So feel free to pause the video and win the game for Hikaru while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting this unstoppable checkmate. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is king to f3. We have to move the king with tempo. Now the rook is hanging, and Magnus has to do something about the rook. The problem is you don't really have a good square for the rook. He does grab the pawn, which means if he's not getting checkmated, at least he grabbed the pawn. He might grab another one, so he should be okay. But now comes knight to c5 with check, king to e8, and here Hikaru played rook to g1, and he was in this position on move 32 that MagnusCarlsen resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. The problem is the knight covers d7, the pawn covers e7, and rook to g8 will be checkmate, and there's very little you can do about this. To give you an example, if you go for some checks, let's say rook captures with check, king f2, rook h2 check, king f1, okay, you get rid of all the checks, or even better, king to e1. Now you have to move the king, let's say king to f8, but now comes knight to d7 check. Only square is e8, so king to e8. Now knight to f6 check discards the g8 square, so of course king to f8 runs into rook to g8 checkmate. And if king to d8, this is again checkmate, as the pawn covers e7 and c7, and the knight covers the d7 square. So that's not happening. And another thing, after rook to g1, and okay, let's say we give these few checks, you could play f6 to make some breathing room for your king. But now rook to g7, and again, what do you play here? The d7 is coming, so even if you try to stop this, still pawn to d7 check, and now you either have to give up the rook or you move to f8, and now knight captures on e6 will be a very nice checkmate. So yeah, very nicely done by Hikaru, and even though, like I said, it was a pretty wild opening, a3 g5, after the second move e4 and c5, we were basically playing a Sicilian with this weird continuation a3 g5, which of course cannot be good for black, but it wasn't a problem. Magnus could have played it, but basically it all came down to this move when Hikaru delivered this check, and he should have played king to d8. Then knight to e4 no longer comes with threat, so you can play pretty much whatever you want. Hikaru would still be a little bit better, but nothing serious. So yeah, great game by Hikaru, beating Magnus like this with a move like A3. That's the good stuff. And also, I believe Hikaru won the entire event. He won Title Tuesday and the Magnus. Although he joined late and he played weirdly, in all of the games, he still achieved a nice result. But yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank Frank Brown, Bjorn Bartel, Alan Winery, congratulations Dr. Taco and Francis Ayer for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions, such as this one and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day, and sorry about the crooked board in the past few videos. I really didn't see it while I was recording. See you soon.